Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Corinne.
Hi.
I really try and give enthusiasm on people's names. I find it that people love that. Hasn't worked so far for me since, but tell me
Oh.
tell me a little bit about yourself and if you want what you do professionally.
I am a wildlife rehabilitator. I've been doing it for a few years. I just moved to Utah, so now I'm out here.
It's weird because you said rehabilitator. So immediately I think of a koala with an alcohol addiction, but I have a feeling it's a bird that's probably had like an injured wing or
Mhm.
an animal that's been in some type of maybe a possible hunting accident.
Yes. Yeah. So it's healing injured or orphaned wildlife. But I have gotten all the jokes that are just like, I didn't know possums had cocaine problems and uh,
That's a
all
better one
that.
than a koala with an alcohol addiction. Holy crap. But when it comes to all right, so I have a few questions on this. Ever since I was a little kid, I've gone camping all the time. And I remember I would always find like a bird egg or something. And it would always be, don't touch it because then the mother wouldn't come back to it. Is that true? Or have I been lied to my whole life like Santa Claus is real?
That is actually a myth. The mother will come back. Birds can smell, but not well usually. So if she sees you touching it, she might freak out and like try to dive bomb you. But it is hard to start a new nest, so they usually will just come back to the existing one.
There's about probably a lot of people out here listening that's just like minds are completely blown. Think all of those times you could have saved a baby bird, people, but you listened to your parents. This is why we don't listen to them. Okay, we like to go off and do our own adventures. How did you get started in something like this?
I got a degree in wildlife management, and there wasn't much open in the job field for that. So I started volunteering at a rehab center.
Where did the passion start for me? When I was a little kid, I was always in love with nature, love with animals. I tried my hardest even as an adult now, trying to become a park ranger, but like you're saying, there's not really a whole lot of positions available. It seems like once they get the basic crew or staff members, they just don't really hire for anybody else, and if they do, it's a rare opening, like somebody retiring. I stopped wanting to be a veterinarian when I saw my 14-year-old Dalmatian get its let's just say a doctor stuck his fingers up his butt, and apparently that's what vets do, and I'm not about that.
Yeah, vets do a lot and hardly get praise, especially from the one they're helping. Not a lot of animals appreciate the vet, and I get very used to that because I get to administer medication. So I get dirty looks from all the animals.
It's kind of difficult too. I mean, if you're working as like a vet or something, you get a little bit of, I guess, anxiety, or you deal with a lot of stress because most of the time when people are coming in there, besides getting their animals checked, they're also getting their animals put down. So it's like a sense of tough times for that person, especially like if they got to put down a beloved family member. I mean, if anybody's had an animal die on them or like a life, like I had a dog that lived 17 years. I mean, that was a moment where I'm flipping out in the freaking lobby, like, we got to do anything possible to save this animal. They're like, dude, she's been dead for like 2 hours. I'm like, you're lying to me. Like, it's like those moments where like you guys go under a lot of stress too. And I mean, are you specifically working with not domesticated animals, but wildlife animals?
We do get calls about domestic animals, like the exotic ones that vets won't look at. And we try not to because we are not licensed veterinarians. So we're not allowed to give advice and like actually help some animals. But we do take all wildlife, and we do get people who get attached very quickly. Like, you'd be surprised. Someone would find a baby bird and 2 hours later be like, you need to save it. I named it Chuck. Like, he needs to be better. And like, let me know how it goes. Call me tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, we'll
That
try.
that person's going places. If you named a bird Chuck, I would have thought of some like I mean, how many times you come across somebody naming their animal some crazy pet name like, oh, that's Giggles Jr. It's like, whoa, like you're still 4 years old, even though you're in your 30s.
We had a little girl bring us ducklings, and she had named each one, and I looked at them all, and I was like, I don't know how you told them apart. I'm not going to be able to tell them apart. But I wrote
Is
it on their intake form of what their names were, and I was like, good luck.
is that one Chet or is the other one Chet? No,
Yeah.
that's that's Chuck. It's like, well, why do you name so many of them? Why don't you just have like number one, number two, number three? But I mean, it's beautiful though when we look at like our at least our human connection or interaction with animals. I think everybody's got a specific animal from when we're taught in books. Like I don't know how your kindergarten was, but for my kindergarten, when we're learning the alphabet, they related them to like an animal. A is for antelope. B's for Benny the bear. I'll never forget that one.
Mhm.
Um, C is for Charlie. I think it was Charlie the chipmunk. I don't know. I could literally sit here all day and rattle off the whole alphabet, but I don't feel like that would be very nice to you, I would say. But well, it's interesting though. Like when I did ask, when did this passion start for you? Were you just a kid and wanted to always just explore what the animal world was like?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm and always was like every vacation we had was camping, just out in a new place and um, kayaking, climbing, just everything we could do outside. And then I'd be the kid who finds a feather and they're like, "Oh, gross, put it down." And then it would just be in my hair.
You'll get a disease from that feather. I'm like, no, I won't. I've already had it in my mouth probably
Yeah.
5 times before I told you I found it. Like that was my childhood. Like, what would you consider probably one of your favorite animals or ones that you really, I guess, have a passion for? Maybe not one that you found or worked with, but one that you've specifically had like a passion for.
I do like birds, so it's definitely a bird. The American woodcock was my favorite when I was learning about it in school. It was just really funny. They're very um, different.
Most people would have tossed out like I would like a blue jay or maybe a red robin or that's a restaurant I think, but like or a cardinal or something. You're just like I would like a what is it called? You said a woodpecker?
American woodcock.
Okay,
Yeah, I know.
woodpecker.
Cock means the male though. Cock is like
I
a
know what a
rooster's
cock
cock.
is.
It's not.
I'm aware of what a cock is, but so what exactly did you find fascinating about this animal? Because, like, I mean, for me, I tried so long to get my falconry license. Once I figured out that that's an actual legit thing, you can work with falcons. I'm like, what person doesn't just want a giant bird on their shoulder all day long? Pirates were obsessed with them, parrots. But imagine you can get like I thought as a kid you could get like an eagle. I was like, I can get a bald eagle on my shoulder. My grandfather just looked at me. He goes, yeah, Robbie, you can get a bald eagle on your shoulder. And probably in his mind, he's like, you're the dumbest kid I've ever met in my entire life.
Yeah, you can get an eagle. I don't even have my falconry license yet. It would be like another step from what I'm doing. I think you need a few years of training under a falconer, but I think you also need like same as what I would need is a vet to help you, and then a rehabber who is willing to help you if something goes awry or like give you advice, because not a lot of vets know about like birds, or let alone wild birds. So they would want a rehabber to give you advice if you're like, he fell sick or he's got this weird bug. Like we've seen more of those than hopefully the falconer has. So they would ask for advice. And so I don't even have my falconry license, but I think it would be really cool.
I mean, who doesn't want a falcon? And especially like get to see the cool outfits you put on them. I put a bandana on mine, which would be great with this COVID situation. I would probably be able to bring him into a store.
There are certain equipment for falconry. They're called jesses, and it's the things that go around their ankles that you can hold so that they can't just like fly away from you.
That's what I'm
And then a
afraid of.
hood,
That's my
which
big.
covers their eyes
That's
so
my
that it's
that
less stimulating.
that would be my biggest fear is having a bird and being like, all right, let's do this. And then you unleash him and the next thing he flies away and never comes back. I'm like, everything I love just flies away or dies.
We are looking into getting a falconer for one of our birds who he's not healing well, and we think it's because of his personality. So we need someone to train that out of him, kind of.
What would you say would be the biggest problem that you face doing the amount of work you do? Do you think it's just the fact that it's hard to educate people on animals, or do you think that it's a lot of the situations you have to deal with when you come across like maybe a very injured animal that might not be getting better?
Every day is different in my field. We might get a new case or deal with a new person, but a lot of our job, and all the books say this too, is dealing with the public. If you don't like the public, this is not the field for you. I know you think dealing with wildlife would be like no public and like you can just do whatever you want, hang out with the squirrels. But a lot of it is dealing with the public and educating the public so that some incidences don't happen again or happen less less regularly.
Well, you have this job too as an educator. You're trying to not only help out these animals, but show people like what's so awesome about them and why we should respect the wild. I think a lot of times when I went camping, I spent a lot of my times biking around, just kind of enjoying the woods, starting, little campfires and gathering sticks and stuff. But the most interesting things was there was one of these campgrounds I went to that had a national like bird reserve. So it was like this aviary thing where I thought honestly it was like a zoo. Like they had a glass wall for you to stare outside and they had pictures of like the little plaques of what birds were in that enclosure. And I was like, well, this is different. I was kind of hoping for monkeys, but I really found a fascination with the birds, the types of ones that were out there, the most interesting ones. But when we had an educator come by, she had a giant owl that was on her arm. And it was so interesting to see how people would react taking photos and how fascinated they were, like, interested in this animal. I think it's an important job because you're doing one of the hardest things, which is trying to get people to focus on learning something about these animals that we really don't respect.
Mhm. So we did have, not in Utah, but at the last time I was at, we had possums. And so everyone would be like, oh, wow, cool, an owl. And then you would bring out the possum and everyone's like, oh, okay, like why? And so then we would talk about how they don't carry rabies. I think there's only been one positive case in like all of history that one possum had rabies. They're not a common carrier. Their blood is too low, so it doesn't carry the disease well. And they are the number one tick eaters. So if you don't want Lyme disease, you should have possums around and enjoy your possums.
I'm about to buy me a possum farm. There you go. You could put them on a leash. See, I looked that up too. What animals, like endangered species, I know they sell them online, which is not the best, but I was like, what would be cool to have that would be different from another animal? They sell like lemurs and stuff, but for my whole entire life, I wanted a sloth. I'm like, they don't do a whole lot. They're definitely, when it comes to care, they're probably one of the highest priority up there just because they move so freaking slow that they grow moss on their fur. And I'm like, I can grow moss on me if I'm like sitting down for a week, but these things, like, they rarely eat and they just seem so cool. But I've heard from people that they're vicious, and yeah, I still am like, I'll get my fingers eaten off just to have a sloth.
Their bite is really hard, just like most plant eaters. Like they can break bone, they just don't usually. And they're so slow that like you wouldn't think he's not gonna get me. But if you're not watching, they can bite really hard. But they're they are herbivores, and there's actually a type of moth. It's called the sloth moth because it only is found on sloths. So they have like a whole ecosystem just on them.
It's a buy one, get two option right there. Holy crap. You get a pet moth and then you get a pet sloth. And I'm not talking about sloth from the Goonies. I'm talking about an actual animal sloth.
Yeah, they're two-toed sloths, and then there's three-toed sloths, and I believe the two-toed is more rare.
Yeah, that's
I
the
don't
one
know.
that's endangered that you can't really get. Three-toed are more common in people's households, but they're great swimmers, which you would be like, what? Because they're slow, but I guess because of the long limbs, they help them swim fast.
That's another reason that the moss grows on them so well, is because they get wet and then they don't dry very well. They're very several coats of just fluff, and then it
I'm
just gets in
I'm
there.
I'm smiling because immediately you said that. I'm thinking of a sloth like hair salon where we just bring in sloths and just set them on the table and just hair. You know how happy they would be. They would be loving that. What would you say would be probably one of the like your worst experiences working with animals? Like, have you had any certain dangerous things happen? Have you ever been scared? Like, I feel like I've walked into a pet store and I've seen a tarantula, and I'm like, I couldn't function. It freaks me out so bad.
There's been a couple of times where I'm not as afraid as I should be because I'm so used to working with like big raptors and stuff. I was like 2 feet away, my face, when I was bending down to pick up a bucket from a bald eagle, and I look up because he's chirping at me, and I'm like, oh, hey, I probably should have grabbed something to like protect my face with, but he didn't do anything, and I knew that he wouldn't, but he just started chirping that I got too close, and I was like, you're right, I did. You definitely could bite my face right now. So then I just got up and walked out of the. I was like, sorry, bud.
I think I've come across an actual bald eagle once. My grandparents live out in Delaware, like out in the country, and I just randomly see this giant bird. I mean, freaking huge. Like the easily its body was the width of a door. Like not from height to like top to bottom, but from side to side, just wide. And its wings were all spread out and it was just laid on the ground like it was stunned. And I was like, what the hell? And my grandpa comes out with gloves and starts dragging it across the street to where he drops off most dead things. I'm like, what happened? He goes, freaking eagle hit the electric pole. I was like, like, is that a crime? I heard if you killed a bald eagle, it's a crime. He's like, I don't, it's who are they going to arrest, Robbie? Are they going to arrest the pole? I don't, what are you trying to say to me? I was like, should we bury it? Like shoot some guns off or like, give it a flag or something? He's like, just staring at me like, I don't get you living too long in the city, boy. Like that type of look.
You do have to report if you find any government protected bird, you should report it to the government. That being said, I don't know off the top of my head which number you would call or for exact species, but like if you found a robin, they are government reportable, but like no one's gonna report a robin. But for an eagle, we would really recommend that you call someone.
Well, yeah, that's I think the statute of limitations. I was 7 when that happened. I don't know when that runs up. Hopefully, I'm still not in trouble for that. Let's just edit that out of the podcast, huh? When it comes to
They
like
wouldn't do anything to you for it. They would just want to know.
when it comes to one of the biggest problems that you see just in the industry besides educating people, do you find it has to do a lot with hunting? A lot of like probably the animals that you come across when it comes to rehabilitation probably have been something a hunter has done. A lot of them are pretty ethical and pretty right when it comes to doing their job or doing what they love to do, but I know a bunch of people that'll hit deer and leave them in the middle of the road, and it's like you at least can't call it in or drag it off to the side. Like,
Mhm. We are pro hunter. Like we're never gonna try to fight that group. It's like a large community. But we have gotten some unethical hunters. There was one time out east when we got a possum in with just an arrow sticking through it, and it was like a dull tip arrow. Like it was just a practice one. It wasn't even supposed to be used for this. And I believe he made it actually. But then just a few days ago, we have an open case going right now about there are some buckshots in a couple ravens. We had 2 within the week come in with just shattered wings. So we didn't see anything in the first one. We just thought like, oh, he must have hit a window or something, like hit something very like got hit by a car or something. So we didn't call that one in. But then the second one, when we took an X-ray, there were fragments of a bullet still in it. So then we had to call our DNR officer, and they opened a case, and they think they found a person, so that's good. That happened really fast, actually. Now we're just waiting for justice. And since it is a federally protected bird, we called the state government, we called for the state government, and they can only do so much. They can give a fine and give a warning, but since it is a federally protected bird, he will be getting a much heftier fine and possibly jail
I can tell you right now, it's a Steelers fan that shot that Raven.
time.
That's why, I mean, they're so majestic too. Actually, that's why a lot of people don't know the Baltimore Ravens. They're named after the Raven from Edgar Allan Poe. Like that's what it's supposed to have some deep meaning behind it. People are like, "Wow, that's pretty deep for Baltimore." I'm like, "Yeah, we get like that sometimes." I think birds are pretty majestic. I think a lot of people take them for granted because I mean, I live in a beach town and we see nothing but seagulls everywhere. So people, I mean, there was a point here which I thought was kind of messed up. I mean, I'm not pro seagull. They do get really annoying. I probably had 2 windshields broken by seagulls only because what they do is they go in the water and they grab a crab out of the water. And what they do is they fly up as high as they can and they drop it to crack it and then take the meat out. Well, it hits my car. I'm like, okay, well, here's another windshield I got to replace. And after a night of like partying or something, you're not too happy on that one. So what was actually happened for a while, people started getting fined for it, was they would take Tums, the little anti-acid things, and they would feed it to the seagulls and it would cause their stomach to explode. Yeah, it was a big thing. I was like, I've never hated anything that much or an animal that much. I've accidentally killed an animal before, not on purpose. I feel bad about it. It happened in 4th grade. I'm not going to lie about it. It still bothers me to this day. It was one of those sand crabs, little tiny ones that dig into the sand. I thought he was dead, and I tried to give him CPR, and I killed him.
Oh.
I tried. I was like, I'm sorry. I literally I did a bunch of things. I had a burial for him. I was like, this is like I don't count fish technically as yeah. I don't know. I might have killed a couple of fish too. This is like a murder podcast. I'm sorry. I didn't want to take it that way. I mean, but it's interesting though too because to see how people respect animals, especially like it shows an influence. I think that needs to be brought on when you're a kid. I mean, as a kid, it's always fun taking a field trip somewhere and going to a museum or something. I mean, do you work out of a zoo or do you work out of your own rehabilitation clinic?
It's our own rehab center, and we do have a side that if someone's just very interested or they give us a large donation, we'll show them around our education side. So we have a couple hawks and owls that are non-releasable. We have a mink that escaped from a fur farm, so not releasable because she's not even from this area. And we'll just let them look around that area, and we'll tell them more about the species and how they got here. Like, yeah.
What would you say you plan on doing? Like what's the end goal for you? Are you trying to travel somewhere like Africa to go spend actual time in like real wildlife scenarios or up in the mountains somewhere to get like maybe a different view of things?
I guess this is kind of my end goal, like just because every day is different. It's always an experience here, and we're so short wildlife rehab center like people who are willing to work the amount of time that's required, especially during baby season. Which you're lucky you got me on my weekends because I work 14 hours a day just for birds, and that's not even for the mammals who might have to come home. And I do like a 3 a.m. feeding or a 6 a.m. feeding, and then back to work for.
Is a lot of that because of you work so many hours is because of the fact you guys are understaffed?
Yeah, that's part of it. Like we don't have the shift work right now, but it also is baby season, which all centers are a little uh, pressed for people right now. Um, you have birds that will eat on the hour, sometimes more than an hour if they more than every hour if they're small. Um, so that's 14 hours a day, and then you have the mammals, which if they're small will eat every 3 hours. So that would be through the night.
Do you ever have animals when you rehabilitate them and they get back to maybe close to 100% or be able to let go? Do you free them back out into the wild, or are you keeping them because they probably become pretty domesticated at that point, like used to feeding times and all this?
we um we try very hard, and hopefully all rehab centers do. Some are a little less. That's just because they don't have the equipment to, but we try very hard to not imprint them. That's when they see you as food and you as their family, and that's very dangerous when they're raised alone. So we try to raise them in groups of similar species that will show them how to be their species, and they'll learn from each other. And then you only come in, you only look at them for that feeding time. So we don't do a lot of tours, and we don't want them to see a lot of people. They only see the people who are helping. And then we've had a very good success rate with releasing if they're raised not alone, because then they'll only see you. We want them to see each other. And then feeding the right diet is also very important, because we've had some that were raised on a poor diet and then they had to stay longer. So then, or like they needed more intensive treatment, like stomach pumps and like physical therapies, and then they'll see you more and it's a little harder. But still, if we're only in for the treatment times, they won't always get attached.
So, if I was going to ask you, what would be your most memorable experience that you've had doing this so far? What would you say? Like, have you had a specific moment with? I mean, you got to think if you're talking about imprinting, you probably when you first started probably imprinted with at least one of those animals. I mean, the whole factor is you get a connection. I mean, I've tried for so long. I remember I found a baby bird that was hurt and I nursed it back to health. I mean, I had help. Obviously, I'm not gonna say it was all me, but when we let that freaking bird go, I was upset. I was like, there goes my friend. Like I always thought it would come back or something. It never did. It totally spaced out on me. It was like, I don't care about you. Thanks for getting me well. I'm good to go. Now I'm going to go find my side hose. I'm like, no, come back.
I definitely have imprinted on more animals, hopefully, than have imprinted on me, because that's always the goal we want. The goal is to release. Um, you're not technically allowed to keep any animal, and you're not allowed to keep any animal that you have imprinted. Um, if you've imprinted it, you have to put it down because it can't be released. Um,
Whoa, wait a minute. You have to put it down if you've imprinted with it?
it's against your licensing, yeah.
How do you stop not like how do you not do that? Like imagine if you're just helping one out a lot and it imprints on you. Is that your fault?
So if we have one that's non-releasable, like we had a vulture who had she fell out of a tree, so she only had half of one wing, and one full wing, so she was non-releasable anyway, and she was still a baby, so we were allowed to imprint her because she would have been non-releasable. But if we had one where it was completely healthy, it was just too young, and if for some reason liked you more than the others, then we wouldn't be able to release it, and it would be very dangerous. We have gotten some from other people from the well-meaning community who has imprinted it now, and they're like, I need to release it, can you take it? And we're like, yes. And then we get it and we learn that it's very imprinted and doesn't know how to talk to others, it doesn't know how to mate, it doesn't know others' warning signs, so it can't be released. We are able to keep those because we didn't imprint it, someone else did, and we'll have them as educational animals.
I think you're
But
showing
we at the
you're showing
rehab
an well,
center.
you're showing an important side of this field. The whole fact is not only the physical amount of stress that you undergo, but also the emotional amount of stress. I mean, it's not fun watching an animal die. It's like the one reason why I would never work at an SPCA. Like putting those animals down if they don't get adopted, I couldn't have that. Like always made the biggest mistake when I was a kid. My grandmom would take me in like, we're gonna go get a dog for the family, so don't look, don't name them all or don't do this. And I would walk in and be like, Spots. I would just start calling out name like that's Spots, that's Jagger, that's Cheetah, that's Barney, and like she's like, what did I just tell you? Don't name all the animals. And I'm like, I can't help it. They're all cute. I like them all except that one. And it was like this bulldog. I don't know what it is about bulldogs. They freak me out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this job definitely isn't for everyone. It's very emotional and time consuming. And it does take a lot of knowledge and experience, but I mean, that's for any job. But it is very taxing on the person.
You'd say the biggest payoff is not really the money, but more about the benefit of what you get to do every single day. I think a lot of people, and honestly, an office job, even though it might be more money, it's not more fun. I mean, this is something it might be harder. It's just more of an experience. Like I'm more of a hands-on learner. I like to work with my hands. I like to be out in it if I'm going to be in it. And I think that's one of the most important things too. Cause I mean, you're talking about how people like look at animals and how people think of animals. I mean, we don't really respect them a whole lot. I feel like that needs to be more emphasized when we're kids. I think we take the basic field trips, we take the basic education trips, but it doesn't really happen a whole lot anymore. I mean, we look at field trips now, they're all being turned virtual reality. Like you can't experience a zoo virtual reality. I'll tell you, I went to a zoo in Hawaii. I watched a monkey. And this is what I believe, that people come from monkeys because I saw this, okay? Now stick with me on it. My grandma has her camcorder. She's videotaping these monkeys. I watched this male chimp look at the glass, look at us, immediately grab a stuffed animal. And do you know what this ape did with that stuffed animal? The one thing usually guys are known for. It started using this animal to pleasure itself. I have never laughed so freaking hard in my entire life. And my grandma, and this is on videotape, she is filming this monkey looking through her little VHS camera and laughing her ass off. But not laughing like ha ha ha, laughing like like the snort. And I swear to God, I've been more uncomfortable, but also it's never been more hilarious in my entire life.
Yeah, monkeys are special.
But I think that's important, like those moments that you get at a zoo, stuff like an experience of watching a little kid's face light up when they've seen an animal that they're not used to seeing, like in a house. Like, I mean, they're amazed by a cat and a dog, but when you see a fox, you see an elephant or a buffalo or something, and their face lights up, oh, it's pure ecstasy.
Yeah, it is fun. I know a couple of people actually who are educational tours at the zoo, and so then they get to share all the fun facts about animals. And sometimes they'll pull out like a lizard or a snake or something and let the kids touch it, and then they'll let it like crawl around, and they'll say more facts about that. Um, and so they just love to learn everything. I tell them things, and then they'll try to relate it back to their animals. Like if I say something about a rabbit, then they'll be like, "Okay, we have rabbits here. Like, let's share these facts." And so it's very neat to meet those people. They're very excitable and like just love to learn about wildlife. And then you see them work with the public and like share that knowledge with everyone. And they don't even have scripts anymore. They just remember everything and they just take from that. And then kids ask questions, so it's kind of hard to have a script when they're just asking 20 questions. Most of the questions being like, "Can I touch it?" or like,
That was always my question as a kid. Every museum I ever went to, can I touch it? The guy's like, no. I'm like, I'm gonna touch it. I just was seeing where you stood, so I have to know if I have to run really fast once I do it.
yeah.
He's like, you can run. I'll trip you down some stairs. I'm like, okay. Just making sure we're on the same page here. But when it comes to like this job in general, do you do a lot of research when it comes to trying to study these animals and figure out what they need exactly, or do you do a lot of learning on the job, I would say? Like, because it seems like even though, animals, we can say, oh, they like this type of food, this species like this types of food, it's still about the difference between the actual animal compared to its species. I mean, we're all people. We all don't like the same foods though.
hmm Sometimes it's a thing of tricking the animals. Like for possums, they won't eat things green, so we have to make like a smoothie with like all the kale and broccoli or whatever you want in it, and then adding like a strawberry or something so that they actually eat it. So
Damn.
sometimes it does take experience just with the animal to know, because your book can tell you, and it does take a lot of book learning. So don't get me wrong, but that's why it's so hard to get a rehab license, because they want you to experience every season, because every season, like a baby season versus like winter, is like way different. So they want you to experience all the seasons, the highs and the lows, and like they want you to experience of like wide variety of things that could happen. Um, and so you can read in the book all that, like everything that you need about their diets, and like they need to have calcium and they need to have this and they need to have this and this and this, and then you go up to the individual, like make a perfect, like beautiful Instagram worthy like plate, and then put it in front of them and they look at it like, ew.
They're like,
So
I'm
you
more than happy with somebody chewing up a worm and spitting it into my mouth. That's probably what they're thinking. Honestly, you said the smoothie thing. I'm like, that bird eats better than I do. Holy crap, that sounds like a 5-course, meal or something.
I have said that plenty of times, that these animals eat better than me. Like I'll make them a 3-course meal and then go home and just eat a bag of chips or something because I'm tired. Like,
Depending on what chip you're eating when you go home, that bird might have a better meal.
mhm.
Are we talking barbecue or Cool Ranch?
Well, either way, they've had more protein than I did.
All right, let me tell you something. Look, this is why I don't have a falconry license. I would be sharing probably my meal with the birds. So I'm like, we're getting taquitos from the 7-Eleven roller all day long. Like, I mean, a bird sitting and munching down on like a taquito and a freaking Slurpee. That's a bond for life. Like, I heard sloths live to be like 40 something years old. I'm like, that's a pet. When it dies, you're crushed. You're like, I can't function anymore. I just lost my lifetime best friend. Like, I mean, I love birds as much as the next guy. I think they're amazing to look at. I understand. I mean, I'm not a fan of bird watching, mostly because I can't sit still, but I get why people like to watch them. But my great grandfather, he had birds all the time. And I mean, it was crazy. He let them out of the cages, but the relationship he had with them, like they actually respected him. And I've never seen that really before. And I think it's because they looked at him, like you're saying with the imprinting stuff, as a father figure, as like, this is a person that cares for me. So there's that sign of respect. If you got near them, they would freak out. They would start chirping. They would start doing something. I'm like, I can't even hug my own great grandfather. And he's like, sorry, bud, hugs are all for them. I'm like, oh, okay, man. All right. I get it. You got me a Wii for Christmas. I'm fine with just that.
Birds are very smart, and parrots are actually smarter than the average bird. Fun fact, falcons are actually closer related to parrots than they are other hawks, like a red tail or a Cooper's hawk. they're more closely related to parrots. That was just discovered recently.
Wait, so if they're closely related to parrots, is it possible at one point we can get them to speak like or mimic like a parrot?
They don't really have the voice capacity. It's a little harder. I think I mean, well, when you're dealing with your falcon, like you'll learn the difference of his chirps. And it is kind of weird to be like, oh, he's hungry, and everyone's like, is that like a baby's cry? Like, how do you recognize that call from him?
Nah, he's just being an asshole. Trust me, I spent a lot of time around a rooster, and I started picking up some things when he started like just screeching. People are like, "Is he hurt?" I'm like, "No, he's just a jerk. He just doesn't want anybody to sleep, and I mean, a lot of it is strutting your stuff too. I mean, if you ever grow up around chickens or something, a lot of the time they're just doing it to be the cock of the walk, literally.
Mhm.
When it comes to studying or things you had to do to get your license, how because you talk about it was difficult, like how long of a process is it, and is the reason why it's so difficult because of just how complicated dealing with animals is? I feel like that kind of weeds out the weak, the people that really want to do it and the people that aren't really super into it.
So the books say that you need like I believe it's like 800 hours, but most rehab centers will have, because the book says you need like 800 hours and a letter from a vet that is willing to help you, because you're not allowed to do some of the vet stuff, and like they don't expect you to know all of the knowledge of a vet, so you don't need like that degree or anything in school. And then you need a letter from an already existing rehabber that will help you. Say if you get a new animal that you've never heard of before, and then you need help, so you call the rehabber and they're like, oh yeah, we get like 20 of these a year, like they're so common, and so then they'll help you. And so book says you need 800 hours, but to get that letter, a lot of rehab centers want you to volunteer with them for a few years just to get that variety of cases and animals, because there could be some that only migrate through, and so you'll only see them within that like month of the year because like it hit a window, and so you need to know how to care for that. Window strikes are very common during migration.
Is that
And
just
then
because of the Lysol commercial, like the Windex thing, or is that just
don't
because?
clean your windows. If you love birds, you won't clean your windows.
That's a good thing. I must love birds because I never clean
Yeah,
my
right. It's
windows.
just an excuse not to clean your windows.
I
Um,
gotta tell the hotel I used to work out about that. I used to work at this hotel, and we'd always have to clean windows. I actually almost died doing that. So,
Believe
you know,
that.
I mean, you have to unlock the window so people don't jump out. So we had a key, and I stood up on the thing because I'm 5'8", so I'm not 6 foot where I can reach out and clean the top. So I took the window out and I stood up on the balcony when I was reaching out to get the window, and the thing fell in. And I almost fell 11 stories. And the guy's like, "Whoa, man, you almost died." I was like, "I know." He's like, "Are you still gonna clean the windows?" I'm like, "Fuck that, fuck
Yeah, right. No, I need my heart rate to calm down.
that."
Yeah, I'm terrified of heights, so no.
Yeah, see, that's the biggest thing for me is like anything, roller coasters, any of this type of stuff. I know the ones who I went to, they had like an upstairs part to it that was like an overlooking, like you can kind of get like the top of the cages where some of the birds would hang out at. I was like, I just wasn't about going up there. I was more of like a ground type. So like that's where I became fascinated with a lot of animals and spent a lot of time on the ground. So I'm not constantly freaking getting whiplash staring up trying to look at a bird. You know what I mean? It's difficult, I would say. I mean, after a full day at the zoo, if you go to like an aviary place, you're just sitting there holding your neck. Like
Mhm.
I've been staring at birds all day. It's like, all right, Grandpa, let's get you back in the car. He has dementia again.
Every time I go bird watching, it like without fail, I will look at the sun. Sometimes with my binoculars on, sometimes just like trying to follow the bird. Every time I'll stare at the sun at some point. It's like,
I've been bird watching, I think, twice, and it is. I always get a couple seconds of looking at a bird, then they fly off, and then I spend the rest of the time looking for it. He's like, "Dude, pull the binoculars from your face and then look for the bird. Then once you find it, pull the binoculars up to your face." I'm like, I'm looking around like the freaking binoculars, like, this is what people talk about tunnel vision.
yeah.
Like looking all over the place. If I had to ask you, based on like any wildlife animal, not the ones that you've worked with, but any of them, what would you say would be the most dangerous to come across? Because this is kind of a debate in my household.
Like a native one or like one from like Australia, because everything
Any,
in Australia is
any,
dangerous.
anything, I would say. If you had to pick one that you, all right, two answers technically, because one that you'd be afraid to run into, and then one that you think is the common one people would be afraid to run into.
People are afraid of everything. I've gotten a call like, I'm not like there's an injured gull, and then we're like, can you put it in a box? And she's like, I'm not touching it. It could give me rabies. And we're like, okay, first of all, there's very few rabies vectors. Birds are not one of them. Reptiles
Raccoons.
are not one of them.
Wait, so you can tell if an animal has rabies by one thing, if I'm correct, is that their eyes are have this like weird, like looks like if someone took a picture of them, there's like a weird glow in them.
I would say that's very hard to identify because that could be like the photo or like the light.
I
Um,
meant like if like at night or something, like whenever I come across like, because I mean my grandparents live out in the country, so we come across foxes, all these types of actually my beach town that I live in, I was sitting out on the curb at 2 o'clock in the morning and I thought it was a cat and it ran up to me and I went to pet it and it got like, I mean, probably as close as my computer is to me. And the thing was a fox and it yipped and I was scared. I booked it. I hauled ass. And I mean, it didn't even chase after me, but it has this weird orange like glow, like if a red eye of a camera. And I always wondered if that's how if you tell an animal had rabies.
I I haven't heard of that. I know like the foaming at the mouth isn't great, but possums can do that. Again, possums don't carry rabies. Possums can do that as a defense so that other people think that it's like sick and poisoned and like you don't want to eat me. I'm already poisoned. Like I'm gonna kill you too. Um, so that's not always a good sign. And then even they say when it's out during the day, because during baby season and a mom's hungry, like she has to feed 5+ babies. She's out during the day because she's hungry. So depending on the time of the year, that can't always be a factor either. So it really, you have to go by a lot. And then kind of just knowing what rabies animal looks like. If it looks like really thin and like kind of just goes in circles and it like starts hitting its head on things, that's usually a sick animal.
Yeah, it's probably not mentally sound, I would say, if you're hitting your head on walls. I mean, I do that for fun, but who's to say I'm sane? When it comes to probably one of your craziest calls, what would you say would be the craziest one you've ever experienced?
Oh, that's so many. We deal with the general public who doesn't know anything. So we've gotten calls that are like, I have this eagle, like you have to come pick it up. You like, I'm not touching it. You have to see the size of its talons. Like, hell no. We'll go and it's a pigeon, like a black and white painted, fairly pretty pigeon. And it's like, okay. Then I've gotten calls that are like that gull one where she's like, it's rabbit, I'm not touching it. And we're like, okay, well, first of all,
Have you ever
no.
come across one that's super like extraordinary, like somebody found something that was like pretty rare, or at least one that you've never like it's kind of a little bit unknown, like
Someone
something.
called us about a baby squirrel. Actually, there's two. They call about a baby squirrel. We come to get it, and it's a mink. Or one time it was a fox kit, and we're like, this is not a squirrel.
Wait, hold on. What's a mink? Is that like it's kind of like a little? It looks like a
Weasel.
sea otter or something, or it looks like one of
It's
those.
a weasel family like otters, but they're really long and thin. They're the thing that those coats are made out of.
Yeah, I
Like
had
it would
a,
take like
I had,
80 minks to make one coat, so I don't understand the
I had a,
appeal.
I had a famous comedian, Steve Cantwell, on my podcast, and he took this huge salvia trip, which is like this weird drug that makes you trip. I don't know if you know a bunch about salvia, but he spent 8 years in a drug trip, which was 45 seconds of real life. And he talked about for 2 years he worked with this apple orchard, but also he would help his family kill mink. They had to kill this
Oh,
whole thing of mink. And he was explaining mink and he's never met them before. But after the drug trip, he knew all about them. I was like, yo, you just picked up some crazy knowledge. So I had to look this animal up. So you're saying mink. I was like, I had to look that thing up. It looks weird. It's like leathery kind of.
yeah, that's an otter, I think. Which otters are actually soft. Just when their fur is wet, it kind of just covers the top coats because they have waterproof fur, which is like a couple layers. So that first coat will look wet, but then if you like separate it and like look in, it's dry. The like under layers are dry and fluffy and warm.
Are they vicious mink?
Usually, I wouldn't recommend people
I
try
mean,
to
I,
touch one.
I always recommend ferrets are pretty vicious too. They're not like hurtful animals, but they attack a lot. Like my buddy had one and he would just let it, the weirdest thing about ferrets is their spine. it's like a gyro. They can twist, and it looks like you
Mhm.
would break them in half, but it's like a dish towel when you're wringing it out to like water. You can like that's what they can do, and he would always like release it around the house. So I'd be like, I mean, I wasn't sober, I was pretty stoned, but I'd be walking around the house in socks or something, and this ferret would come up and bite your freaking toes, and it's like,
Mhm.
God, get off! What is happening? Where am I? Like it's like that whole scenario. Like you're tripping out.
Mhm. Yeah, so those are all in the same family. Weasels, mink, otters. Skunks actually used to be in the same family, but I think they're separated now, because science. But yeah, they're all very they're cash hoarders, single cash hoarders. So when they kill something, they bring it back home and save it for another time. So they do kill a lot. So they're not like raptors where they would kill something and eat it and then kill something the next day and eat it. They kill when they're hungry. Mink will kill when they're not hungry just to have a storage for later. So they are a little more dangerous and people are more afraid because they say that they just keep killing. Um,
Kind of like a squirrel with nuts. They like to hide them.
Mhm. Yep, cash hoarders.
Okay, now I do want to go back to the question. What is one of the animals you would consider the most dangerous?
It would be one that I'm not common to work with. Actually, I'm afraid of rattlesnakes just because it could kill me. We
Really?
haven't gotten one in yet, but I feel like we would, just because I don't know. We get a lot of things in. We've gotten everything, but rattlesnakes are one that I have not dealt with.
I feel like the one that the public would be the most scared of would probably be like a grizzly bear. Like I've talked to a few people in Australia and they're like, "How are you alive?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And I guess because the propaganda of how popular like everyone in America has come across a bear at some point. And I'm like, I don't think so. But in Australia, we think the same thing, or not in Australia. In America, we think the same thing with Australians that they're like
Yeah,
sharks.
there's giant spiders that can just hang out under your bed and you'll never know like what they'll kill you.
Yeah, and it's apparently nothing like that over there. I'm like, dude, what about you? You're probably getting killed by kangaroos. And he's like, bro, they're not that bad. There's signs that tell you don't go over here because there's a kangaroo. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, still, I can watch a YouTube video of a guy boxing a kangaroo, and I can tell you for a fact that kangaroo wins every time.
Yep. I mean, if you boxed a deer, the deer would probably win as well. They have a
Whoa,
very strong kick.
yeah. Have you ever? I would be afraid to take down a moose.
So the way I explain cervids, that's the undulate creatures, the ruminants. These are all words that you probably don't. I can't explain a word with another word that's hard for people
I
to know.
read a dictionary when I was a child.
Okay. Um, so if you hit a deer with your car's hurt. Like I mean, the deer's hurt. If you hit an elk with your car's hurt. If you hit a moose, the moose is gonna come back and flip your car. Like, because it's pissed off that you hit it. Like, it's just
Yeah,
gonna come back and
there.
destroy your car.
I watched a video, which I recommend this page on Instagram. If you don't follow it, I've learned it through Joe Rogan. Nature is metal. I don't know
Hmm.
if you've ever heard about that, but I watched a moose get attacked by like some wolves or something. That thing came back after being like, it looked like it died and was going off to die somewhere. It came back and beat the hell out of this pack of wolves. I mean, just straight up running into them. And people like, there are videos of moose literally chasing down cars, people in reverse, like, we got to get out of here, Tommy. And this moose is like just trotting down the way. I'm like,
Hmm.
those animals are the things I get scared about. Like the big debate in my family is my uncle and my dad one time camping were arguing over which would be the worst way to die, by a bear or by a shark. And I think I agree with I don't know. I think the shark is probably the scariest one because you can't see it. But my dad's like, "You're insane. It's a bear because a bear is just gonna maul you to death." And I never thought about that until I watched the movie The Revenant, and I watched Leonardo DiCaprio, rest in peace. He died in so many movies. They pick him up and just slam him all over the place. And I was like, that's what would happen. Like we have this mindset. Like I just saw a meme on Facebook this morning. It's like 9 steps to successfully kill a bear. One's like let the bear swing. Second step's like go in and try and grapple the bear. Third step, get his back. Fourth step, put him in a rear naked choke. And it's like all the way to the ninth step. And then it says on the ninth step, in all reality, you died at step 2. And I was like, that's
Mhm.
100% true. There's no way
Mhm.
all these people out there, like, I could take a bear. I could easily take a
Start
bear.
wrestling it, put it in a full Nelson. It's fine. You can do it.
He's trained, everybody. He's trained. But like, even when we train animals too, like if we talk about the circus, that used to be very popular when I was a kid. You know, people would go to these events and watch these animals on like tricycles and do all these things with tigers and stuff. And I think a couple of the incidences that happened, like there was a monkey on a tricycle or like on a unicycle, and he accidentally bumped into a bear. And I guess the bear just turned around and mauled it to death in front of all these people. And that's why, I swear to God, that's why we don't see circuses anymore. So many freak accidents have happened. I mean, with tigers and stuff and trainers being attacked. I'm like, you guys are trying to domesticate and teach an animal that's not meant to be domesticated.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah, so I always advise, I'm like, I would never want a pet like poisonous snake or sorry, venomous snake. Poison is you eat it and die. It's poison. It eats you, you die. It was venom. Um, but I would never want like a venomous snake or a spider or like anything that because I have a cat and like my cat on a bad day, like I'm bleeding.
yeah.
I don't want a pet venomous snake on its bad day because I'll die.
And it's like, what happens if you have a bipolar snake? Then you're kind of screwed because you don't know when the good day or the bad day is.
Yeah.
I'd rather deal with a bipolar Shih Tzu than a bipolar snake, because I feel like
Right?
if the Shih Tzu really steps on me, I can just be like, okay, and then just set him outside or something.
Yeah, so I don't know all those people who like want a pet tiger because they're like, oh yeah, it's so badass, it would be so cool. It's like, what if it has a bad day? What if it's like PMSing and just murders you?
You talking shit on Joe Exotic?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some shit happened on. I didn't watch it. I'm sorry.
I watched it for a podcast that some dude wanted me to come on, and it ended up not happening. So I wasted about probably 6 hours of my life. But the one thing that really scared me was there's a woman on there that lost her hand, and she was like,
Yeah.
the doctor's like, we can sew it back on, but it's going to take a couple of years of physical therapy for you to get feeling back into it. She's like, just keep it off. And I'm like, what? And she was back to work 2 days later. I'm like, hold on a second. I need a little bit more than 2 days. All my animal knowledge either comes from experience of messing with an animal and getting hurt, or Over the Edge or Over the Hedge, that one movie with all the cartoon animals. Those are the two things I live my life by. If they haven't made a movie about it, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's fair. And there aren't a lot of movies about like possums. That's why everyone thinks they're rabid all the time. Because they can do that foaming thing, but
Whenever you see one in the road or you see one playing dead, do you consider it dead or do you think it's faking? Because like I'll drive like to work or something and I'll see a possum laying on like the highway and I'll just think I'll swerve around it. I won't just run it over. I'll swerve around it because I'm like, he's probably faking it, but I don't know. I won't go back and poke it with a stick or anything.
So it is possible that it is just playing dead. But during baby season, we do have all of our volunteers or like anyone who sees a dead possum, we will have them check, and not always to make sure that the possum's alive, but to check the pouch because there are marsupials. So they have babies inside their pouch. And so we'll have everyone check every possum. If it's a female, check it more, and just grab us the babies out of it. And
Now,
so
is it like a similar to a kangaroo pouch?
Yep. Yep. They have a little hole just on their stomach, and then you can stretch it and like look around.
You can
And
see
so
inside of its like stomach is what's really disgusting. I saw a video of some dude opening up a kangaroo's pouch and there was a little baby, whatever wallaby, whatever you want to call them in there. And you saw like the inside of the kangaroo. And I was like, that is crazy.
so yeah, it is like another layer of skin. You can't actually see like their intestines. Um, but you can see the nipples, and possum nipples are actually much longer because they latch on for months at a time. Like they just hang out in there, so the nipples are actually very long. They're like an inch, so the baby will swallow the whole nipple and then they'll just stay there for like a few months. So the nipples are very long, and it's kind of obscene if you've never seen it before. Like the first time you see it, you're like, huh, that's gross.
I don't know if I'm attracted to that or if it's freaking me out.
Really long nipples, yes.
This is awesome. This podcast, I think, has covered everything from cocks to fucking long nipples.
Cocks and nipples. Yep,
it's a
that's what you get when you talk to me.
this is how you get people in when you educate them about animals. Just talk about this. Be real with them. Let them know that there's some names in the animal kingdom that are pretty weird and pretty insane, but it's
Well,
fun
that's
to
where we
learn
get
about.
the swear words from. Is like you for ass is a donkey. Like that's where we get the names from. So how can I not
And
use their scientific name? Not scientific, but
donkeys are stronger than horses, and also zebras are faster than horses.
mhm.
So that's weird that we use horses for transportation. I'd rather ride a zebra because it looks more badass. And I'd rather ride a donkey because who doesn't want a stubborn ass? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The
It's
world
really
works
hard
out.
to domesticate a zebra, though, so that's why we settled for horses.
I saw the movie White Stripes.
Yep, you're right.
See this? All my education comes from movies. I am right now building a DeLorean in my garage, and I plan on going back to the future. Look, Ren, I think I've wasted enough of your time. I appreciate you coming out and doing the podcast. I want to
I
be
hope
able.
you learned something from not a movie.
I will probably have to turn on a couple more movies, get a little bit more education, and come back to you on it. But
Well, now I want to go watch Over the Hedge, so
do it. It's a great film, especially the beginning where that's how I learned how to break into a vending machine. You just beat the crap out of it with a bear or something.
yeah, that would do it.
Well, if you want to promote your Instagram page, anything here, if you want to shout out to any fundraisers or any websites or anything where
All the
people can
fundraisers.
the
If you want
fundraisers.
any fundraiser advice, just follow my Instagram, and then I'll constantly say things like Audubon Day and National Turtle Day. We're all this month.
Squarespace. Shop at Squarespace. That's all I got. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.